Our story takes place in a small village nestled deep in the mountains. This village, hidden away from the bustling world, was a place where time seemed to stand still. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine trees filled the atmosphere, creating a serene yet eerie ambiance. The mountains surrounding the village stood tall and imposing, as if guarding the secrets that lay within. The village was old, the houses were small and weathered. Each home told a story of generations that had lived and passed through its doors. The wooden structures creaked with age, and the roofs were covered in moss, a testament to the years gone by. The cobblestone streets, worn smooth by countless footsteps, wound their way through the village like veins, connecting the heart of the community. The people were quiet. They mostly kept to themselves. Life in the village was simple and unassuming. The villagers went about their daily routines with a sense of purpose, yet there was an underlying tension that permeated the air. Conversations were hushed, and laughter was a rare sound. It was as if the village itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The village had a secret. It was a secret that everyone knew. Whispers of this secret could be heard in the corners of the village square, in the shadows of the marketplace, and behind closed doors. It was a secret that bound the villagers together in a shared silence. A silence that spoke volumes about the fear that gripped their hearts. It was the secret of Uncle Choke's house. The house stood at the edge of the village. It was a place that children dared each other to approach but never did. The mere mention of Uncle Choke's house was enough to send shivers down the spine of even the bravest soul. It was a place shrouded in mystery and dread. It was a tall, skeletal structure. Its windows were like empty eyes. The house seemed to watch over the village, its presence a constant reminder of the unknown. The windows, dark and vacant, gave the impression that the house was alive, observing everything and everyone. It was as if the house had a soul of its own, a soul that was tormented and restless. The paint peeled from its walls like dead skin. The house had been empty for years. The once vibrant colors had faded, leaving behind a ghostly facade. The garden, once tended with care, was now overgrown with weeds and wildflowers. The house stood as a monument to neglect and decay, a stark contrast to the rest of the village. Nobody dared to go near it. Locals whispered tales, stories of strange noises, ghostly apparitions and unexplained events circulated among the villagers. Some claimed to have seen lights flickering in the windows at night, while others spoke of eerie sounds that echoed through the empty halls. The house was a source of endless speculation and fear. They said it was haunted. They said it was cursed. The legend spoke of a tragic past, of lives lost and souls trapped within its walls. It was said that the house was built on cursed land and that anyone who entered would never return the same. The stories were enough to keep even the most curious at bay. The house was a scar on the landscape. It was a constant reminder of the darkness that lived within its walls. The villagers could not escape its presence, no matter how hard they tried. It loomed over the village, casting a long shadow that seemed to stretch into every corner of their lives. The house was a symbol of fear and uncertainty. The villagers avoided it. They crossed the street when they walked by, children were warned to stay away, and even the bravest adults would quicken their pace when passing by. The house was a place of dread, a place that no one wanted to acknowledge but could never forget. They never spoke its name, but the house was always there. It was a presence that could not be ignored, a silent sentinel that watched over the village. The house had become a part of the village's identity, a dark chapter in its history that refused to be closed. It loomed over the village like a watchful specter. The house was waiting for the day when someone would be brave enough or perhaps foolish enough to uncover its secrets. The villagers lived in constant anticipation, knowing that one day the house would reveal its true nature. It was waiting for someone brave enough, or foolish enough, to step inside. The house held its breath, just as the village did, waiting for the moment when its story would finally be told. And so, the Village of Shadows continued to live in the shadow of Uncle Choke's house, a place where the past and present were forever intertwined. Uncle Choke was a hard man. He lived a solitary life. He never spoke about his past, but everyone knew he carried a darkness inside him. Chon was Uncle Choke's son. He was a young man, full of hope and ambition. Chon loved his father, but he didn't understand him. He didn't understand the darkness that consumed him. Chon had left the village. He went to the city to make a life for himself. He found success. He found love. He thought he had outrun the shadows of his past, but the past has a way of catching up to you. And for Chan, it came in the form of a letter. The letter said Uncle Choke was dying. It was a somber message, written in shaky handwriting, the ink smudged by what seemed like tears. The weight of the words pressed heavily on Chan's heart, a mixture of sorrow and urgency filling his mind. It said he wanted to see Chan one last time. The letter continued, detailing Uncle Choke's final wish. He wanted to see his son, to speak to him, to share something important before it was too late. The urgency in the letter was palpable, and Chan knew he couldn't delay. Chan didn't hesitate. He packed his bags and returned to the village. The journey was long and filled with memories of his childhood, the village, and the old house that held so many secrets. As he traveled, he couldn't help but wonder what his father wanted to tell him. He found his father weak and frail. The sight of Uncle Choke lying in bed, barely able to move, was heart-wrenching. The once strong and vibrant man was now a shadow of his former self, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination.
Chan, I have one last wish. I want you to renovate the house. Uncle Choke's voice was weak but firm. He spoke of the house with a sense of urgency, as if it held the key to something important, something that needed to be preserved. I want to leave it to you as an inheritance. The house, with all its history and memories, was to be Chan's. It was a heavy burden, but also a great honor. Uncle Choke's eyes pleaded with Chan, seeking a promise that he would take care of the family legacy.
Chan was hesitant. He knew the rumors. The house was said to be haunted, filled with the spirits of those who had lived and died within its walls. The villagers spoke of strange noises, shadows that moved on their own, and an oppressive atmosphere that seemed to weigh on anyone who entered. He had heard the whispers, but he couldn't refuse his dying father's request. The whispers of the villagers echoed in his mind, but the sight of his frail father, the urgency in his voice, and the weight of the family legacy pushed Chan to agree. He knew he had to honor his father's last wish, no matter the cost. The renovation started. Chan hired workers from the village. The workers were reluctant, their fear of the house evident in their eyes. But Chan's determination and the promise of good pay convinced them to take on the task. They were afraid of the house. They worked quickly and quietly. The atmosphere was tense, the workers whispering among themselves, their eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to move on their own. The house was alive, and it seemed to be watching them, but Chan wasn't afraid. He was determined to honor his father's wish. He worked alongside the villagers, his presence a source of strength and reassurance. He knew the house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of his family's history and legacy.
We need to get this done. It's my father's last wish. Chan's voice was firm, his resolve unshaken. He knew the importance of the task at hand, and he was determined to see it through no matter the challenges they faced.
As they worked, tension grew between Chan and his father. The stress of the renovation, the fear of the house, and the weight of the family legacy began to take its toll. Chan and Uncle Choke found themselves arguing more and more, their once strong bond strained by the pressure. Uncle Choke was demanding and critical. He hovered over the workers, muttering about how things should be done. His frustration was evident, his desire to see the house restored to its former glory driving him to push everyone harder. Chan tried to be patient, but his father's constant negativity wore him down. The strain of the renovation, combined with his father's relentless criticism, began to weigh heavily on Chan. He found himself questioning whether he could fulfill his father's wish. The house seemed to feed off their anger. The air grew heavy. The atmosphere in the house became more oppressive, the shadows darker, the air thicker. It was as if the house itself was reacting to their emotions, feeding off their anger and frustration. The shadows deepened, the house was awake, and it was hungry. The house seemed to come alive, its presence growing stronger with each passing day. The shadows moved with a life of their own, and the air was filled with an eerie sense of anticipation. The house was waiting, watching, and it was hungry for something more. One night, the tension erupted. Chan and his father were arguing about the renovation. The old house had been in their family for generations, and each brick seemed to hold a memory, a story, a fragment of their past. But the house was falling apart, and Chan wanted to modernize it, to bring it into the present. His father, Uncle Choke, was adamant about preserving its original state. The argument had been simmering for weeks, but tonight, it reached a boiling point.
You're disrespecting me, Chan. You're just like your mother. Uncle Choke's voice echoed through the dimly lit room, filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. His eyes, usually so stern, now glistened with unshed tears. The mention of Chan's mother, who had passed away years ago, was a low blow, and it cut deep.
Chan snapped. He couldn't take it anymore. The constant criticism, the never-ending comparisons, the weight of expectations, it all came crashing down on him. His hands trembled, and his heart pounded in his chest like a war drum. The room seemed to close in on him, the shadows growing darker, more oppressive. The words burst out of him like venom. He didn't recognize his own voice, filled with such raw, unfiltered rage. It was as if all the pent-up frustration and pain had found an outlet, and there was no stopping it now.
I hate you. I wish you were dead. The words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. Chan's face was contorted with anger, his eyes blazing with a fire that seemed to consume him from within. The room fell silent, the only sound the ragged breathing of both men.
Uncle Choke stared at him. His face was a mask of rage, but beneath the anger there was something else, something that looked a lot like heartbreak. The old man had always been tough, unyielding, but in that moment he seemed fragile, almost broken. He raised his hand to strike Chan, but he never got the chance. The room seemed to shift, the air growing colder, thicker. It was as if the house itself was reacting to their fight, the walls closing in, the shadows deepening. Uncle Choke let out a scream. It was a scream filled with pain and terror. His face twisted in agony, his eyes wide with fear. The sound echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls, filling every corner with its haunting resonance. He clutched his chest and collapsed to the floor. Chan watched in horror. His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. One moment they were arguing, and the next, his father was on the ground, writhing in pain. His anger evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, creeping fear. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had wished for this. In his moment of rage, he had wanted his father gone, and now it seemed like his wish was coming true in the most horrifying way possible. He had killed his father. He rushed to his father's side. Desperation clawed at him as he knelt beside the old man, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He called out, his voice breaking, but there was no response. Uncle Choke's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, but it was too late. Uncle Choke was dead. Chan was alone. The house, once filled with the echoes of their arguments, now stood silent. The walls, which had seemed to scream with their anger, now seemed to mourn with him. Chan's heart was heavy with regret, the weight of his words crushing him. He was alone, truly alone, in the house that had